Chuck Salem here. I'm the CEO of Unique Venues. I am sitting in my home office here in Delaware, which I always laugh because people say, now Delaware, what state is Delaware in? And I always have to educate people, even in the United States, that Delaware is a state. So people from New York City are the worst ones. I'm like, Delaware now, is that East Coast or West Coast? And I say it's 2 hours south of where you live. You know, it's kind of funny, but anyway. So here I am sitting here in my office and have an incredible group of people here today on our panel. It just makes me happy to see each and every one of the folks that have volunteered their time and service today.
Hey,
the other thing that makes me,
I hate to interrupt. Your shuffling papers are doing something there, and every time you do,
it's right on my computer.
There you go. Thank you.
Those are my questions.
Go for it.
The other thing that makes me happy is how few people there are here today with us. And the reason that makes me happy was when we were in the midst of the pandemic, we would have 400 people on one of these webinars. And today our numbers are low because people are not able to be here because of a pre-scheduled meeting that they have to attend to plan for reopening or take care of a group or whatever it may be. So, but like Joel said, it's recorded. So make sure you share this with folks. So I want to get started today by asking our panelists to introduce themselves and, more importantly, the venue that they represent or venues that they represent, because I think it's good for our audience to develop some level of connectivity to the people who are here today. So let's go ahead and we're going to start. I'm going to call out names in the order I see them on my screen. So I see Jill first, Jill Porter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Porter, the Director of Sales for Maritime Conference Center, which is located on the campus of MyTags, the Maritime Institute of Technology and Graduate Studies, just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. So we train mariners, deckhands up to pilots of ships, mainly on simulation-based technology. And then we have a conference center and hotel, and the money that we generate supports that 501c3 nonprofit school. So certainly fits in the Unique Venues world. We have 100,000 square feet of meeting space and a 232 guest room property. And I would just say that, you know, throughout the pandemic, you know, we've been here, we've been open with the exception of maybe 2 months. And, you know, hosting all kinds of meetings and events. You know, it kind of started to become just 20 to 50 people was kind of our sweet spot, if you would, which is a little different than where we were in the past. And we've also done some unique things like quarantine our mariners to ensure their safety before boarding their ships for job assignment. So it's definitely been a unique and interesting time for us.
Thanks, Jill. Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I am coming from Washington, D.C. I run 2 unique venues. One is just under 5,000 square foot of a meeting space in DuPont Circle. It's actually owned by realtors that rent out the space part-time for meetings. Unfortunately, it has not opened and has remained closed throughout the pandemic. We flirted a little bit this summer, thinking we could open this fall, but Delta and DC regulations had other plans. The other venue is the United States National Arboretum. It's actually a federal property. It has been open the entire time. It is 446 acres of outdoor space. And we run that actual program out of the foundation. Thus, we don't have to abide by some of the government regulations that have existed when it comes to DC event restrictions. And we turned into a wedding factory and did weddings throughout the entire pandemic and are up to right now currently our 50th. So every weekend we are celebrating love.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Suzanne Shaw.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Shaw, Executive Director of YALE Conferences and Events in New Haven, Connecticut. We're halfway between New York and Boston. For those of you who don't know where New Haven, Connecticut is on the East Coast. We have a typical scope of venue list, which consists of residential colleges, about 22 dorms, we call them colleges, 2 conference centers. We just built a new conference center, which we have not used yet, and a couple hundred other academic spaces on and off Yale's campus. We've been shut down. We shut down in last March and reopened in May, where we received some summer programs, and we have been running some events, but we're kind of doing more virtual, as most are doing at this point in time, and receiving students as we speak. One thing we've done really well is pivot to virtual events, as well as taking on other essential university work, such as isolation housing and just supporting the general academic housing mission at Yale. Thank you.
Thank you. And Diana? Oh, you might be on mute.
Got to unmute. My name is Diana Frick. I'm the Assistant Director at the Ranch Events Complex in Loveland, Colorado. We are about 1 hour north of the Denver metro area. Our campus is a county-owned facility, multi-purpose. We have a 5,200 seat indoor arena. We have a 40,000 square foot exhibition, trade show, meeting room space, an equine facility, which also has 2 stalling barns attached to it, a youth community 4-H type building, and we're on 240 acres, so we have a lot of outdoor space that we rent as well. During the pandemic, we were not ever closed, but we had certain spaces that were not open for business. In fact, the arena, the Budweiser Event Center, has just started coming back online. They did one hockey tournament for NCAA during the pandemic, but that was no spectators allowed. So they just hosted their first 2 spectator events, a rodeo and a monster truck rally last weekend. But the equine business was open a large part of the time. We actually, for a short period, were turned into an alternative care site. So we were leased technically by the state. And then we became vaccine testing and COVID shot site, all the while having outdoor things like a fireworks show for the community and an outdoor Halloween trick-or-treat event. So we've just tried to really think with the options that we had and the opportunities we could create and do whatever we could for the community throughout COVID. But at this point, we don't have any restrictions on the facility, so we're operating at full capacity. We have had some trade shows that are still struggling to get back up just because they can't get vendors and then staff to work once we do get a vendor. So we're slowly coming alive again. And we just got done at the beginning of August hosting our annual county fair.
Thank you so much, Diana. And it's a great segue because you started touching a little bit on restrictions or no restrictions at your venue. And it's interesting because one of the things I do every day is I start my day by reading the latest on COVID. And I think it's important when you lead a company like Unique Venues that you're always kind of keeping your finger on the pulse, and I do. And it's because it's so funny because there's 1,000 different pulses when it comes to, I mean, everything is so different and so varied. And so one of the reasons we like to bring a panel in is because we like to hear not only the variety of the venues, but let's hear a little bit about some of the restrictions. I mean, some of the interesting things I've read just today, for instance, is that I was reading about the NFL and some of the differences in the NFL. For instance, you have a stadium in Las Vegas where the Raiders will play. This will be their first, I think it's their first full season in Las Vegas. And you have to have a vaccine. You have to have a vaccine record to go to the game. There are other stadiums where there are no restrictions other than what the NFL has provided. teams, if you're unvaccinated as a player, you're required to wear a rubber wrist bracelet that shows that you're unvaccinated, so other players and fans know that. It's just very interesting, the types of policies. I'm watching the ticker change on who requires certain things now that the FDA here in the United States has fully approved the Pfizer vaccine. So it's just a moving target. And so I'm curious if you could each touch a little bit on what kinds of restrictions and or let's talk more about requirements that you have in place for groups, things like to vaccine or not to vaccine, the masks, no masks, social distancing, reduced capacities, those types of things. How are you maneuvering through at this current time? And maybe talk a little bit about what you see coming down the pike as well. Let's go in a different order this time. Let's start with Natalie. And you have two venues to kind of give a perspective on.
Yes, so when we were opening up our DuPont, well, we in DC, every indoors, you have to have a mask on. So that mask mandate is back. My DuPont venue, since we aren't open, we don't have regulations at the moment because we just don't have any meetings. At the Arboretum, and most of the federal government is going this way, and this actually just got implemented this week, is we are requiring all vendors to sign forms confirming that they are vaccinated. If they are not vaccinated, they have to present a negative COVID test that was taken within 72 hours. If that is in fact negative, they then still have to wear a double mask as well as socially distance. And we are just implementing that across the board. It does not, however, impact any wedding guest. That does not follow along them. Again, we're all outdoors, so it's a little different, but all vendors will have to be vaccinated.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Okay, let's go to Suzanne. Suzanne, tell us a little bit about what's happening at YALE.
We're a little on the strict side. So right now we're not even allowing guests on campus. It's just internal faculty, staff, and students. We have an event gathering and meetings policy that is online. Anyone can go look for it if they're interested, but essentially we cannot have more than 20 indoor and 50 outdoor right now until September 20th, and that goes up to 250 people. And so that's how we're approaching it. I would say every 3 weeks to a month, they update the policy based on what's happening in the area. Everyone must be vaccinated. This includes faculty, staff, it's a requirement. And if you can register as a guest and apply for special privileges, they have to be vaccinated as well. And we all have to wear masks and keep six feet apart. We're still able to do some functions, but again, we're doing minimal at this point in time.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, and Diana on the mute. There you go.
I got it this time. So we currently do not have any capacity restrictions. When we started really seeing events coming alive again in March, there were restrictions. And then they kind of lessened and lessened as we got closer to summer. The interesting thing that we have found is because we're a multi-purpose venue, we have not seen the corporate meeting conference business really come back yet. That may have a lot to do with corporate employees not really coming back to the office yet. So we haven't really seen a rebound in that. However, like our equine business, there have been people going to horse shows ever since the pandemic started. Places like Texas and Oklahoma, those venues never closed. So they've been going to horse shows, and there's not a lot of, it's not a spectator sport. It's really a exhibitor sport. So you're in your own little pod of people with your family or whoever you're traveling with. And then our arena business will be very interesting, as Chuck was talking about earlier, with the different industry type of things that we're seeing coming out with the largest concert promoters, AEG and Live Nation, saying in their venues, you will have to be vaccinated to attend. Right now, we're currently leaving that to show promoters. So we have an AHL hockey team. We imagine that the AHL league will dictate some of that kind of restrictions, but individual artists that we've booked, again, we think that we'll see some as those things start to come online, and those aren't until the end of September. We think that they will be dictating some of the restrictions that are allowed.
Thank you very much. So just a quick question for you, Diana, a clarification there. So if the show promoter is dictating restrictions, is there, I would assume, a clause that they assume any level of liability for what happens at the show, the contact tracing and all of those things? Is that okay? Gotcha. Thank you. All right. And Jill.
So we have two different campuses, one on the West Coast in Seattle that is only students, maritime students. And then we have our East Coast here that also has the conference center. So it's almost like we have three different policies going on, if you would. But mid-May is when the restrictions from a state and local level eased, and all of that was kind of dropped. However, we kind of have tweaked our policy like everybody else has several times. About 2 weeks ago, we went from we weren't requiring masks to now we are requiring masks in the public areas. But if you're a conference meeting planner, you have the autonomy to make a decision as to what your restrictions are as far as masks within the actual classroom or meeting spaces. And that was partially driven by a 300 plus person conference that arrived last week and was with us for 3 days. They wanted those mask requirements in the public places to come back, which kind of spearheaded conversation internally. And we decided, you know what, this is the policy we want to adopt for now and move forward with until who knows when, right? From a vaccination standpoint, on the student side, we're a bit more restrict that students need to be vaccinated or have an exemption for a medical reason or what have you. But from a conference guest standpoint, again, it's more up to the meeting planner or the individual organization's restrictions and requirements as to how rigid they want to be with that. We're not currently mandating those things. You know, there are liabilities and things like that that we put in our contracts to protect MyTax and Maritime Conference Center as much as we can. But it's definitely a shared responsibility, if you would, at our campus at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sitting here listening to everyone. And for some reason, I can't help but think of the game WhackaMole, which, don't worry, you're not really whacking a mole. It's, you know, I don't know if anybody remembers, but there's these like plastic moles that pop out and you hit them with this mallet, right? This foam mallet. And the reason I'm thinking about whack-a-mole is it seems like there's a constantly changing landscape. And when I say constantly, tomorrow may be different than today. And so what I'm wondering is, as these different moles keep coming up and you got to whack new ones all the time, the question I have is about communication, communicating to your staff, the team, the vendors. Somebody mentioned I think it was Natalie, who said the vendors are required to show proof of vaccination or a test. Yeah, and the planners, most of all, and the attendees, how are you managing the flow of information and communication to all of these different constituencies that are part of an event? How are you managing? What are some of the processes and strategies you're implementing to get the word out about today? Here's what you have to do when you come to our venue. Let's start with Suzanne this time.
Okay, one thing we are doing just to keep in touch with our clients, which includes summer clients, is we have a monthly newsletter, and we're always keeping them abreast of everything that's happening and what we think is coming at us. From an internal communication perspective, we use Microsoft Teams. We find that as a great tool with the traditional use of email and just having standard meetings as we go.
Suzanne, I have to tell you, I love your newsletter. And I always think after I receive it, that I want to make sure I tell you, I love your newsletter. I think
Thanks, Chuck.
it's such a positive, and it's just really a great newsletter that if you're so kind as to maybe put a link to it in here, I just think the way you communicate is wonderful. So thank you. So I'm hearing from Suzanne, the use of newsletter, direct communication with clients, and then for the internal staff using Microsoft Teams. Great. Side note, one day I'll actually learn how to maneuver my way through Microsoft Teams fluidly. Every day I trip over something. Okay. But I do think it's a great tool. Diana, let's go with you.
So now we're at a point where we don't have any restrictions. I'm not sure how long that's going to hold out, because as in Colorado, all our students have went back to school. And so every day there's a new school district in Colorado talking about new restrictions. So I won't be surprised to see some kind of mandates or restrictions return. But when we were in that point, first off, we were trying to work with our clients the best that we can. I mean, we were allowing, so our contract, of course, has terms about cancellation time windows and returns of those deposits. And we waived all of that. We literally would hold the venue till the day before your event for a cancellation, because we were trying anything we could to get a client to actually host a successful event. We were creative in space capacities and how we could do things. When there was the 6 feet social distancing, we actually ended up holding like an Irish step dancers event, and they just rotated in and out in the time frames, and we cleaned in between so they could still hold their event. We pretty much as a venue were willing to do whatever it took for a client to get to have an event. And just communication, direct as we could be, sharing whatever our health department was sharing, because that's really where we were taking all our guidance from.
So curious, just to expand on one thing, Diana, a question I have for you is that I think you're the only venue on here right here that really kind of it does not have any restrictions. And my question for you is, do you maintain on your website or anywhere kind of this note or notice that you have the right, or it's an ever-changing situation, and that stay up to date with our current policies here kind of thing, knowing that you don't know what we might have to do tomorrow or the day after, right? So did you maintain any kind of a presence like that, or?
Yeah, a link to the COVID site on our county health department, as well as we do have on site when you come onto campus for an event. We do have, a request for a mask if you're non-vaccinated, but we're not checking vaccination cards this time. We have, sanitation, and we've done all the GBAC verifications for our operations team, and worked a lot on cleanliness and sanitizing stations all over. But yeah, we're just taking the precautions as we can.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure there's some kind of notification that you reserve the right to change whatever you need to based upon the changing situation. Okay. And then Jill, let's go with you here in Maritime.
Sorry, that little test, the little thing popped up right as you asked.
They always trip me up.
So the only thing that I don't think was mentioned is one thing we do. We have a COVID-19 Resource Center on our website. So we've been constantly keeping that page updated and kind of training everybody to know that's where you go for the latest and greatest information with, facts and questions and all of that kind of as a resource center, because it was changing so much, especially in the beginning. It was just an easy way to update one thing, have it ready for everybody. And then we do the things everybody else mentioned, the e-blasts and social media. But to be honest, the biggest one is individual conversations with our meeting planners, really taking the time out to have that Zoom call or in person, meeting or what have you, to go through all of their questions and concerns as they're coming. Because again, it's a partnership. We don't have all of the answers and neither do they, but together we can definitely, make some things come together so that they feel comfortable with moving forward.
Great. Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate that. And Natalie.
I have lots to say.
Good.
Look, like DC has been frankly just a nightmare in terms of guidance and guidelines. We've been all over the place. Like in the spring, when vaccines were rolling out, we suddenly were told nobody could dance. If any of y'all followed the national news
Like
about that.
It's
Yeah.
like Footloose.
And it's one of those things that's, how do you even communicate that? You're like, how do you even enforce it? And there was, our bigger issue wasn't so much how we communicated to the people, it was how the communication with the government, which it's just communication from the government is not exactly their strength. And we were really having a hard time because then there were rules that were put in place. You couldn't have a cocktail hour unless everyone was sitting down, which again, how do you enforce these things? And nobody would ever answer us. So when you would go back to a client, which in our case were all couples who were already very emotional getting married, it was kind of embarrassing to have to explain to them, I'm sorry, you're going to have to sit down while you have a drink, or you can't have a first dance. It's hard to do, really. So we communicate with the vendors, and on site, we just do our best to keep everyone safe and healthy. And if I had to listen to what the government was telling us every week, we couldn't function.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you take it and kind of summarize it? Or I don't envy anyone on the screen or any of the 38 participants that we have here today, because we're sending out leads, but we're not getting involved in the negotiations. So you're the ones who have to do all of this discussion and whatever. And so I don't envy any of you. And I can't even imagine how challenging it is. It's funny because at the end of the day, it's like all rolling downhill onto you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're being left to have to police something that is really difficult to do, right? So, and then Jill said something, when Jill was talking, she was discussing about, pre-arrival and communication. And I just want to kind of talk about post-event communication for a moment and asking, has your surveying process changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID with the people, whether or not it's a survey of the planner you're working with about how you help them to achieve their goals and objectives for their meeting or event, or if it's people who are attending the events and you're doing any kind of attendee surveys. Is your survey been modified to include questions about safety protocols and the comfort and the confidence that they've had in being at that event? Or is this something you're not necessarily gathering feedback on? Let's start this time with Diana.
That's an interesting perspective. We're not gathering any data on it. I guess we just think our events want to be past this as much as we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't changed any of our procedures for surveying post-event at all.
Yep. And I just want to clarify, because there's not a right or a wrong answer here. I mean, I think it's, because I guess it's just a point of curiosity for me, are you asking those questions? Are people giving feedback? So just Jill, how about at Maritime?
We haven't changed our actual requests of that information. The surveys that were there pre-COVID are still the same surveys going out. But I think your question is very interesting and something that I have already written a little note on. Mm-hmm. We do, however, ask our planners more on a personal level, from me to them or our salesperson to that, individual, how did things go? You know, do you have any concerns, anything you would tweak? We always ask for feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. We feel like that makes us stronger no matter what. So I think we've done more of that one-on-one. Okay, we're in a different place right now. Is there anything we would have tweaked that we should consider before we have another group in-house? That kind of thing. But not actually on the surveys, which is a really interesting thought.
So if I could just jump on that, just ask a more, go a little deeper with your response, if you don't mind. That, so when you're having the conversations that you have with planners at the end, not necessarily in the formal survey, has COVID, your response to COVID, the steps you've taken, the group has taken, does that tend to come up in the conversation in the post-conference kind of, you know, discussion? Does it consume the discussion? Does it just get touched on in the discussion, or is it really not a focus of the post-event discussion that you're having with the planner?
I would say from the planner perspective, it's kind of a, oh, by the way, they're more interested in, did they have a successful outcome in whatever it was they were trying to achieve with the actual meeting or conference, right? So yes, my attendees got the learning that they needed, or they achieved the certification or what have you. And they were comfortable, kind of the same things that we had pre-COVID, right? That they were comfortable, they had good nourishment, the place was clean, all of those kinds of things. I do think that the COVID piece comes up, but it's not number one. You know, as long as you are able to keep those things in place and make people feel confident and comfortable enough to come and have a good meeting, then on the post-con piece, it's not as much of a focus. It's definitely more of a focus during the pre-con than the post-con.
Knowing what you're going to do. Once the event's over, it's just talk about, you're saying, if I hear you correctly, you're talking about, let's talk about how well we achieved the goals and objectives of the event. Okay. Thank you so much. And now I have another question for all of you that I'm going to ask after we get to Natalie and Suzanne on the question that I just asked, because something popped into my head listening to you. So Natalie, how about you?
I mean, from a wedding venue standpoint, reviews and feedback are critical to the business. So we haven't changed any of that, but it kind of goes back to where I was saying in terms of communication, the only thing we can communicate is how we are handling safety and making sure that that makes them feel comfortable. We have had to add a new cleaning fee that is practically about $1,000 to the client, which thankfully people have understood and they haven't fought us on, because it does again make them feel better. But yeah, it's just more making sure we don't try to defend any of the DC regulations. We just try to make sure
you do what you can with it. Yeah, I do know from experience it's very, very strict there. Very, very strict. I think it's the only place I have been to where everyone has a mask on. I mean, I was in Northern Virginia like a week ago. I don't know if I saw anybody who wasn't wearing a mask. Everybody, and I don't think it was even mandated there. So it was really interesting. But you know, and then I think about weddings. To be honest, my first event I went to was a wedding. A friend's son got married, and it was the day we could drop the masks. No masks unless you weren't vaccinated. If you were vaccinated, no mask. And I went into the wedding and there were 150 people at the wedding and there was not one mask. And I just kind of chuckled because I'm like, all right, this is not a 100% vaccinated group here. You know, it's like that whole, yeah. All right, well, that's good to know. And for some reason, I don't suspect a bride and groom are even sitting there saying, thanks so much for the way you were, you know, your staff was wearing a mask. You know, they're thinking about the fun, the memories that were created. Yeah. Okay, Suzanne, how about you?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking the question, because it didn't occur to me to actually include that in our general surveys. And since we're mostly virtual, I'll echo what Jill says. We do more direct, like how did it go, and more technical things than anything else at this point. So I'll take that with me. Thank you.
All right, great. So here's the question that is in my mind now from Jill's response is, how much really, whether it's pre-event, whether it's, let's just talk about the life cycle of the event. So the life cycle starts with your initial conversation with a potential client, through the booking, through the planning, through the execution, through the invoicing and post-conference meeting, right? So when you go through the life cycle of an event with a planner, how much do you find that they're even focusing on COVID? Or do you more get the sense like people are just like COVID fatigued? I want to talk about my event. I don't want to be hyper focused on the pandemic. I'm just going forward, so there's this whole continuum of, my brother is the president of a school board, and, he said, you hear a lot of people who are complaining about, we won't wear masks. And he said at the whole other end of it, it's the people saying, I don't want to have to resuscitate my children when they come home from school. I mean, there's extreme ends, right, of this whole thing. And there's a whole continuum in between. Is that happening in your conversations with planners? Are you seeing a whole continuum, or is it leaning one way or the other? So everybody's kind of onto my system here. So we're going to start with Jill, because I'm going down the line that I see on my screen. So Jill?
I think through the exploration phase and the planning phase, it is very COVID focused. Now, most of the people that we're working with are nonprofit organizations, union organizations, associations, and some government.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if that is necessarily the individual's feelings, or if it's more of the organization and the appearance that they're concerned about, as well. And then there's also the attendee piece of it, that there's the concern that if they don't do everything right, they won't have enough attendees that will be willing to come to their events in person. And then, of course, with the recent variants and everything, all of those conversations have gotten heightened again, whereas it had started to kind of dwindle down a little bit. And now everybody's right back to the same place where they're very concerned. And it's difficult, right, to make these decisions. It's hard on our side as vendors, and it's hard on the planner's side to try to navigate this and figure out what the right decisions are. So I would say it still is dominating the, planning piece of it, as well as the sourcing, as they're trying to make decisions. Do I even hold this meeting?
So what I heard, I'm glad you just repeated, because you said that at the beginning, which I think is an outstanding point for everybody to really hear at this point, is that it is important to be able to post information about your COVID policies and practices, give people resources to look at, and make sure you're able to articulate what your policies, practices, and procedures are at this time to get people to that next part of contracting. It sounds like this is still a very important part. And then what I'm hearing is, once they're done talking about that, while it still is woven through the very fabric of everything, they're getting down to business and talking about room setups and catering and technology and times for this and all of that. Okay. Natalie, are you finding the same thing, or is it a little bit different for you? 60 miles down the I-95.
It's very strange to be sitting here, and I know I've talked a lot about how strict DC is, but when it comes to booking the events, we don't have these conversations. It's a little odd. So like DuPont, my DuPont venue, when we did have all the leads this summer and everyone was ready to book and go back to meetings, we actually had added a COVID cleaning fee to be like, here's this. Most people asked to take it out because they didn't want to pay the additional fee. Everybody was happy to go with buffet meals. There was just, they would add a little more like 6 feet spacing, but there wasn't a serious conversation about protocols. With the Arboretum, it's outdoors and everyone feels fine. So, it's at their comfort. It's the vendors, we are all vaccinated. And so it's a little bit of a mind trip because I'm like,
It's
wait, what's
counterintuitive, right? It's
Yeah.
like counterintuitive. Okay, all
But
right.
if it's an internal corporate event, we had only like 2 of those galas. It's a liability issue. Like corporate's going to care a lot more about. So we've been putting for buffets and attendant behind the food. So not everyone's picking it. But at a wedding, it's
Have
like,
at it.
yeah.
Have at it.
yeah.
All right, great. All right, Suzanne.
I mean, COVID restrictions have been dictating what we can and cannot do with capacity. Whether we want to put a tent up, we have to fill out an application with health and safety. We wanted to have singers at a memorial service in a few weeks, and we can't. So no singing's allowed. So things like that, no buffets. So, we're COVID, everyone's fatigued. And I can tell you the students are the ones that were here in the summer, the staff. So we're kind of like, just kind of doing what we can, and definitely a lot of outdoor things when we can. We have more room to breathe, so to speak. So that's what's going on here.
Well, literally.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add, Diana?
No,
No?
we're in the same place as everyone else. I think once we get past that, somebody said earlier, that stage of, can I actually have my event? Are the restrictions going to allow me to have it? People just want some taste of normalcy.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we all do, don't we? Right? I mean,
Chuck, I was going to say, I have way more conversations about cancellation policies than I do about COVID procedures.
Yep. And
I
that,
would agree with that, Natalie. Us as well. Attrition and cancellation policies is.
like, I'm willing to book this. I just want to know I'm protected if
Yep.
for some reason I'm unable to have this event.
Yep.
Right? Okay. That's a huge change. And Suzanne, you sounds like you're slowly getting there. September, some things might open up and we'll see. But okay, so this is I have 2 big questions left, and we only have 16 minutes. So this first question is more kind of a shorter answer to the big question at the end. So the question I'm going to ask you now is, none of us really had practice at doing what we've all had to do for the past 18 months. And so, curious question. One of the mistakes you've made if there is one mistake you may have made during this whole reopening process or planning for reopening in Suzanne's case, and you could change that, what's one thing you wish you would have done differently? In your planning to reopen, in your actual execution of reopening, in your servicing, if there was one thing you would change, what might it be? Oh, and guess who's first this time, Natalie?
I mean, that's actually a really great question. I think, oh goodness, a lot of it is, I think in the very beginning, I wish if there was any mistakes we made, it was getting so wrapped up in how DC was handling and the lack of guidance that they were providing. That really drained a lot of us just professionally and exhausted us, and it just added so much stress. And I wish we would have just gone forward with creating our own guidelines and saying this is how we're going to handle things, and not try to like constantly play catch up. I think that that hurt our staff a lot, and that hurt a lot of our bookings because it just led to so much confusion. And I think now I'm at the point where we aren't listening to outside of the things we have to, like mask mandates. Everything else, we're implementing our own policy.
Right. So it sounds like the mistake you would undo is leading your own efforts rather than hoping to be led and to follow the leader. Okay, yes. Gotcha. All right, good. All right. I know Natalie, so I was able to, actually, I know everybody but Diana, but I know Katie from Diana's organization. So Suzanne, what's the one thing you would rewind and redo?
Well, this is a little unique just to our setting, but we took on a lot of essential university projects where now I'm trying to figure out how to get out of those responsibilities slowly so we can get back to our day job. So that came at us quick. And so that I would just say that would be it. And then looking forward, going slow and just short-term planning in our future.
Mm-hmm. You know, Suzanne, it's interesting what you say, because so many of our clients who work at universities, I think they became heroes of that place. They became like, they, in a sense, led the ultimate event that nobody ever could have thought anyone would ever lead. Testing thousands of students. I mean, every day I talk to it actually brings a little bit of goosebumps and a little bit of emotion when I think about, and for those of you who don't work at universities, sometimes the university conference venues they don't necessarily receive the stature they deserve on campus for the work that they do. And all of a sudden, this department who's on the periphery of like the mission in some people's minds, all of a sudden are thrust front and center into the very middle of the institution's functioning to be the heroes. And I think what you bring up is a really interesting question. How will you ever back out of the indispensability that many of you have proven during this time? And that's going to be very interesting. We'll have to check back on that with you.
$1 million question, Chuck. Yes.
It's $1 million. It's a 20 million in some places, right? All right, Diana, what would you redo?
I think maybe the messaging from internal. I can speak within my own team. A lot of team members were on opposite sides of the political voice of COVID. And I think we maybe didn't always share the same message outward facing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a struggle, just trying to rein in fear versus lack of any fear to some common middle ground that aligned with health department regulations.
So it was more about trying to require and come to a common voice for the brand as opposed to the individual viewpoints about the situation, because we all have them, right? We all have what we think, what we believe, what we feel. But at the end of the day, my thing is, we can't let this industry go backward. We can't. We have to lock arms, and we have to keep our industry moving forward. Maybe someday it's just a few steps. Some weeks it's a 6-foot leap, but we have to keep moving forward, right? And we have to lock arms in that. So, Joe, what would you redo?
I think that it would have to do with having more of those moments with your entire staff team to just rally them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily something that wasn't done, but I don't think it was done enough.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to go through so much change and such a lack of control. And that's difficult for human beings to go through things that you can't control and then have to change everything.
Yeah.
So I think supporting our line level staff in more of a camaraderie kind of way, I think that maybe we should have done that a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can continue to impact that, and change that for the future, that we have more moments together just to laugh, to lift one another up, because it hasn't been an easy ride.
So it is really important, I agree with you, for team camaraderie in the face of the most challenging and difficult times. And I don't know, I have been through my own personal levels of PTSD. And let's put it this way, I'm self-divulging here. I can't even look at a picture in my iPhotos from like March or April of 2020. I'm like, I don't even want to see these, because I get this sinking feeling. I think it's like what I felt like going to school for the first time, not knowing, like just this anxiety and this. I'm like, I don't even want to see those pictures. That's a period of time that I just want to forget. But yeah, and that whole kind of camaraderie is so important. That's awesome. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to ask the final question. And anyone, I bet you if there's people on there, which I know there are people on here who have been in all of our webinars, they probably already know what the question's going to be. And I know Jill, I believe, has been on this panel before. She probably knows what the question is going to be, but it's like this. We like to ask our panelists to imagine they have a crystal ball or pretend or whatever. And if you looked into your crystal ball, when do you think we're going to return to this steady environment that is free of constant changing and upheaval and disruptions to how we do our jobs, how we serve our clients, how we contract? When do you think we're going to get back to, I'm not saying normal, I'm saying steady, that there's confidence? Crystal ball. Oh, let's see. Who went first last time? Natalie, is that you? Ah, Suzanne. Get your crystal ball out.
Okay, I predict next fall when you say steady, and with the caveat that, we're on the road less traveled. Planners are used to planning, and again, staying flexible, I say keeping your sense of humor, self-care. I think all those things have to come to the forefront, but I would say next fall would be my prediction.
So a year from now.
A year from now.
Now, let me ask you in your crystal ball, I'm going to throw another curveball. I want everybody to answer this. So Suzanne says fall 2022. Do you think it's going to be a slow and steady increase until that time?
I think we'll get there and then we'll have to retreat again. There'll be a couple iterations of this. I mean, I don't really have a crystal ball, but this is what I'm feeling.
2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step
and then
back.
it'll be like, okay. And then we'll have a more sense of stability and knowing how to deal with pretty much everything at that point, I would assume. So.
Great. Diana.
I think that as we get into fall and winter, it will start to, at least at my venue, I think we might start to see that slow down again, because right now we're really accelerating in our outdoor spaces. I don't know how people are going to feel in the indoor spaces once winter hits again. But hopefully by the spring, we're back out again. I don't know. I'm trying to stay optimistic for the coming season.
Okay, so I'm putting you down for spring 2022.
Okay.
Okay, you good with that?
Yeah.
All right. Jill.
I'm going to say that 2022 is our ramp, but we won't be back to real levels until 2023. Sorry, but as much as I would love to say, I just think 2022 is the ramp. We'll start lifting off, but we won't really be back there until 2023.
So you feel like by the start of 2023, we're going to be back to pre-COVID levels of business?
Maybe not even by the start, kind of the mid 2023.
But you see us ramping slowly, steadily over the next 12 to 14 months. Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with what Suzanne said. We're still going to have these kind of 1 step forward, 2 step back moments, which is why I think that it might be a long ramp. I mean, it's been longer than I think we all ever anticipated this would have been. So I think the ramp up is going to be longer as well.
Gotcha. And Natalie?
I'm actually going to be super positive. I honestly think we're going to know by October if we are going to be getting back up and normal. And I say this in the summer when DC lifted a lot of these restrictions, it was like everybody got very comfortable real fast going back into normalcy, if you will. Masks disappeared. There was no more, having to have your mask on when talking to a waiter. Everyone was booking like crazy. And in DC, the social event scene is so strong. Like the amount of birthday parties, showers, obviously weddings, it's a little crazy. My meeting space in DuPont gets leads for baby showers and birthday parties, and it's not appropriate for that type of an event. But I think it's very indicative that people want to gather. They're desperate to gather. It's the corporate liability and concern And if we get to October where everyone, it's very clear we've gotten a hold of Delta and people have gotten themselves vaccinated and we have these safety procedures in place, I think people will start booking holiday parties and then they'll start feeling comfortable booking, and we can all just kind of, or people are just going to get so over it and they stop caring.
Yeah, one of those things is definitely going to happen.
And I have to say that I don't have that social piece at my property at all. So that it's very interesting to hear Natalie's perspective on things, because I have no social business. We can't take social business.
Yeah.
So to hear that the social business is ramping up so much faster, I mean, that's good. That's a positive thing. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I can tell you from a unique venues perspective, I don't have the most recent statistic, but our website traffic is, at last I looked, 34% above website traffic in 2019. So our search traffic is outpacing 2019. Now I want to put that into perspective. We are outpacing 2019 traffic, but the outpacing didn't start till March. We were underperforming January, February, mid-March. So people are definitely there. Now, our leads are still not keeping pace with search volume. Again, people keep looking. Some are afraid to kind of press that button, press the easy button and go ahead and make the move. But even that, we're seeing more and more. But we've seen a decline in August from July, but now we're starting to see, I don't know why, we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick again in that. We had a great Monday. But it's interesting. I watch all of this, and our SEO team is probably tired of me. I'm like, I want to know, how's our traffic compared to the same date in 2019? How's our this week, this month? And it was interesting because it was heavy social, light professional at the beginning of the kind of March, April, May. Then the professional business leads started ramping up. Now they've leveled off. Social's still strong. So it's interesting, just to kind of watch the behavior of gathering and the human behavior of gathering, and, but I agree with something Natalie said. People just want to get together. People just want to gather. They just do. So, well, I can't say enough about how wonderful all four of you have been participating today, and open and just, completely transparent with things you would change and all of that. And we'll be back again with another expert panel coming up. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
Perfect. And I also want to echo Chuck's thanks. It was really great of all of you to be here today, to share your experiences, your stories, your insights with everyone. Again, many people on this call might be in their own, various part of their journey to reopening and getting things going again. Some people aren't holding meetings and events yet, and probably took a lot away from the conversation today. So thanks for being so open and willing to participate with us. We really appreciate it. And I can tell you, I'll do the math and send you everyone, both the panelists and the people on the call today, the poll results, and I'll compare them to last month because I asked mostly the same questions as last month. It's clear that Delta has got us all thinking about what's going to happen in the next couple months. And we'll see that reflected in the results, but I don't see anyone pushing the panic button, right? There's nobody that's saying, I think there was one person saying they think we're going to close down again. Everybody else thinks this is a small or a medium level of impact or industry that we've got to ride this one out. Some people, last time there were a bunch of people saying, I'll go to a 10,000 person event right now. And I think there was one now that's still willing to say, I'll go to a 10,000 person event. So again, I think this is good news. This is saying to us, we all recognize what's happening. We see what's going on in the world, and we're being cautious because we've lived through this once and we don't want to live through the worst of it again. So we're going to have the conversations. We're going to talk about what we need to do. We're going to be as prepared as possible for whatever this bump brings. But then as soon as we start to come down the backside of that, we're off and running again. And that's what I'm really excited about, is to know that, you know, from what I'm seeing in the data and our conversations, we're all still in that same mindset. So this is not, it's not going to be the devastation for our industry. It's just the next thing that we as event managers and planners have to deal with, which is that unforeseen circumstance that comes up that we figure out, we solve, and we move on. So with that, again, thank you to everyone. I'm just going to do a quick share here one final time and put this up. There we go. And just a reminder to everyone, we do have a webinar coming up in mid-September. This is really more for people that have overnight accommodations. But on September 14th, we're going to talk about how to attract your ideal client and fill your unused accommodations. This really revolves around Intern Housing Hub. And immediately after that session, we're going to do an Intern Housing Hub product demo. So you'll see that on our resources page. You're going to get some emails in the coming weeks about it. If you're interested in learning more about how intern housing can help fill your unused accommodations, join us for the webinar. If you haven't seen Intern Housing Hub yet, you can join us immediately afterwards for that demo. And with that, last chance, if you're working on your session evaluation, fill it out really quickly. We appreciate your feedback. My thanks to Chuck and the panelists for being here today. And we look forward to seeing all of you on a future Unique Venues webinar. Take care, everyone. Have a great afternoon.